Okay, well, I'm happy to. A lot of them, they all seem to be directed at me, which can I just say kind of confirms. I did at the end of my little presentation make the point that it's easy to cut budgets, but it's hard to change people's thinking. And it does confirm to me that there's still work to be done. And can I also just say how predictable that you'd mentioned the banks and the tax gap. I mean, I won't ask if you've actually bothered to look at the statistics on the tax gap, because I'm sure you haven't. But the figure is only 42 billion. Well, in which case you can tell me which tax in particular is the level of avoidance the highest, and which particular part of the income distribution is avoiding tax the most. So which tax? I mean, you said you looked at the statistics. No, well, I mean, this is the point. I mean, it's
you have been ignoring.
Well, all right, I'll tell you then.
My friend here is absolutely right that you have been allowing the right to set the agenda.
This is the real word. No, let's just go. Let me answer the question, please. Now, the tax gap, the largest sources of the tax gap, it's not corporate tax. It's the VAT. It's people, and it's the excises. The most poorly collected tax is actually tobacco excise. It's people going across the channel and bringing smokes across. I mean, and if you look at where the largest sources of tax avoidance are, it's the small businesses, it's the shopkeepers who are splitting their income to make multiple uses of the allowances. And this is actually why the child benefit thing is going to be a disaster. Because if every small business in the country is going to be able to exploit this to maximise their child benefit. So we actually have to take a dose of reality. It's easy to blame the bankers, but it's actually everyone's been taking their fair share of money over the last decade. The bankers didn't double the spending on the health system. The bankers didn't increase the spending on welfare by £100 billion in real terms since 1989. Now, if you look at the increase, it hasn't. It's doubled. It's increased to 200 billion. And if you look at that increase, that's come at a period when we've actually had extremely strong economic growth and we've had big falls in unemployment. Now, you've got to ask, if we actually have fewer people who need the benefit system, why were we spending more on it? Why was the government running deficits when we had incredibly strong growth before the global financial crisis? So it's an incredibly easy fiction to blame the banks, but actually the British public need to take some responsibility as well.
Dave, we've been accused of being on the right, as it were. Do you think there was? Do you have any answers?
The trouble with audiences like this is that they enjoy, and I don't say this it's a self-criticism as much as criticism of you, we enjoy talking to each other. What we find difficult is talking to and indeed persuading the large numbers of our fellow citizens who, unfortunately, still in large number, read the Daily Mail, the Daily Telegraph, Murdoch's publications, and so on, and tend to believe the stereotypes about the fiscal system and about our fellow citizens, which are daily displayed to them. Perhaps because those papers touch, a colleague at the back mentioned George Orwell, touched archetypes, social archetypes, which go back a long way in our collective history. So I think we do need to at least be slightly humble about the need to engage in a conversation which clearly hasn't taken place successfully with our fellow citizens who vote, who endorse the views they read in these newspapers. And I think in that sense, yes, the right does set the agenda often because it is the predominant discourse in our society. And if people who disagree, it's an individual and a collective responsibility to do something about that. One way or another. We can maybe talk in detail later about how that's to be done. Can I just pick up the colleague's point at the back? I mean, was George Orwell potentially a fiscal conservative? And it's an interesting question.
What would he have done different?
Well, I thought I heard you sort of.
Versus cigarettes.
I mean, there were among Orwell's contemporary, a number of old Etonians who were pretty progressive, fiscally speaking. I mean, Hugh Dalton. In the 1940s. I mean, I think. Etonian determinism doesn't take us to...
What would he have done differently?
Blame the bank.
To Osborne.
Blame banking, not the bankers.
Well, I mean, I think you've heard that, you can accept that there is a need for fiscal re-equilibration in the UK public accounts. How you do it, the length of time over which you do it, these are matters for empirical and cautious investigation. Now, I mean, I think that's, you know, to accept that there's a deficit as the result largely of the recession is a truism. You know, we can debate about whether on the eve of the recession the UK accounts were actually out of balance. They were to some extent, but not to a huge extent. The recession caused a problem, which, given normal cyclical phenomena, cycles in the economy, would be rectified in due course. The question is whether you accelerate that process.
But isn't the uncomfortable truth that based on Books versus Cigarettes and other works by Orwell, he would have been nearer to the coalition benches rather than the opposition benches?
I think
Well, that's a kind of fundamentalism.
No.
I mean, you know, is there an or text which gives you Orwell's thinking extrapolated to, you know, the 21st century? I'm not sure that's a terribly interesting
He's
question.
That's a yes.
I mean, I'm no authority, but it seems to me he's one of the interesting things about him is he's uncomfortably unpredictable across rate. But what he very clearly had, and I think that I suppose you may have regarded this as a right-wing agenda, but there's a difference between economic attitudes towards poverty and moral attitudes towards poverty, actually. And in a sense, Orwell was rather interesting. There are two traditions in British thinking, one of which I will just say is Dickens and Mrs. Gaskell, which is that the poor are just like us and are wonderful and are trapped. And then there's the Seaborn Rowntree tradition, which says they're actually different from us and we can count them. And Orwell, actually, rather disconcertingly, has bits of both. Actually, he doesn't fall, but ultimately he thinks morally, having poor people around is very damaging for us, as well as them who he spent a lot of time with. So, anyway, sorry, that's I think. Can I take some questions from that side of the house?